Hey there, it's Christian from 7 Gaming Network, and we're continuing with our Empire at War tactical card analysis. And this time we're going to look at so this is a villain. She is of the command variety, and it is Ciena Ree. I think that's how we pronounce it. The adept pilot, not ace, just quite adept. So we're going to look through her die size, look at her action. We're going to look at points values, how she can fit into your decks, cards to use with her, all sorts. So let's crack straight on with looking at these die sides. So she's a ranged damage character. She's got a 1 black and the +2 ranged. So it feels very much like that's a Ballistic style die start here. Now she's got 1 disrupt. Rather than saying comparison, Ballistic. He's a good comparison as well because they have the same points values. And then she has a 2 lots of resources, so a 1 resource and a 1 resource side. It's a pretty decent die. What I like about it is that it's quite focused. Having the 2 single resource sides means that you have a 1 in 3 chance of rolling damage, or you have a 1 in 3 chance of rolling some resources, and that makes her feel quite focused. If you're looking to do a deck that sticks out some upgrades and dishes out some beats, a die that 60% of the time is either going to provide the damage or give you the resources to help with the upgrades, it feels pretty good. And at 8 and 11 points, it's really very, very good for those die sides. Now, in contrast to someone like Ballistic, she has 9 hit points. So she's got the extra hit points, which of course can make a big difference in Destiny. When a character doesn't die until they've had all the hit points removed, it doesn't matter, they're still at full efficiency, whether they've taken 1 damage or they're 1 damage away from death. All in all, this is looking pretty decent at the moment. However, Ballistic's got a very, very good ability. So let's have a look at what the action is on Ciena. So it's an action. Spend 2 resources to ready a vehicle. I'll be honest, when I first read that, I wasn't particularly impressed. But I think that's because prior to this set, we haven't really been looking to take advantage of vehicles. Now, of course, Empire at War has changed all that, and we see now a lot of very good supports out there, especially of the vehicle variety. So let's have a look then at how we could use this action and how it typically works. Because for me, it was really only in the playing of the card and actually seeing it in action that I realised just how powerful it was. Now, first of all, 2 resources sounds like a lot. I mean, that's our turn's resources allowance. However, what I'm finding in this new Empire at War meta and probably beyond is that trying to get hold of resources these days and build them up is considerably easier than it was. With characters like Unkar in the game, who is a resource generating beast, and with more and more supports in the game that allow us to set up a good economy engine and generate more resources that way. Actually making 2 resources isn't as hard as it sounds, especially when her own character dice, of course, has got a 1 in 3 chance of hitting a resource on it anyway. And for 11 points you can have 2 of those. And you start running pretty decent odds then of getting hold of 2 resources just from her activating, in addition to the 2 that you get on a turn anyway. If you then play any upgrades onto her that could create more resources, like a data pad, it starts feeling really quite powerful for making resources. Paired with a character like Unkar, and actually getting hold of 2 resources to ready a vehicle doesn't seem such a tall order. And of course, vehicles generally have pretty good dice. I'm thinking in my head something like a Slave 1. Now look at those damage sides. Now that costs 4. That's not cheap. But if you're running a deck that's able to put together lots of resources, you get 1 Slave 1 out, having Ciena around, it is really, you could just choose to use your 2 resources, and it feels like having 2 slave 1s on the field. That is actually what it feels like, because you're getting to use that slave 1 twice in a turn. And what gets really bonkers is the thought that you could quite easily go really big on generating resources, and it's not unrealistic if you're running Unkar and Ciena to be able to put together 6, 8 double figures numbers of resources. That's a lot of untaps, and you can just keep doing it. And for that reason alone, Ciena as a mid to late game character is pretty terrifying. If you can amass that amount of resources to just have slave 1 just keep flying in again and shooting, or flying in again and shooting, or an ATST, I mean, that can be stupendous amounts of damage. And so this is the kind of thing that I'm seeing, that I think you have to take note that Ciena Ree's ability, if they can get to mid to late game and build up resources, there's going to be devastating unless you've got a lot of removal. So that action's really strong. So overall, this is a really good die. This is 9 points of health. This is a very good action in the right, very good special ability in the right deck. She's looking really, really strong. Now then, in terms of teams, I've mentioned Unkar a lot because they are a natural fit, and of course Unkar is yellow, so he gives you access to cards like Slave 1. You could of course use Quad Jumper. So that's a fairly obvious one to me. And then in terms of the points values that you've got left over, you could stick a TIE pilot in there. That's quite nice. And this is with Elite Unkar, single die Ciena. You could have the TIE pilot in there, which is really nice because it means that you roll your slave 1 in, it's 3 damage, or it's 4 for 1, and you've got your TIE pilot in there, and your opponent can't remove it. They're going to take that damage. And they have to deal with that one first. Oh, it's delicious. Okay, so TIE Pilot is a really nice thing to go. You could go Night Sister. Night Sister opens you up to blue then, and another card that I really like to use with Ciena is the new Vader's Advanced TIE, because that special that we see on it, it can absolutely wreck. And so imagine if you get to use that twice in a turn. You have your other characters, or you've managed to get some damage out. Let's say you've got 3 damage on a character. You use Vader's TIE that first time, and they're going to go to 6. Well, if you get to use Vader's TIE again and hit that special, that's 12 damage. And Vader's TIE has just taken them from being on 3 damage and feeling like they were very safe to 12 damage, and that's going to kill, of course, the vast majority of characters in Star Wars. So you have to acknowledge that that's really cool. And Night Sister, of course, fits quite well too. She's got that action that means you can re-roll these high impact dice. And if you roll your Slave 1 and he blanks, let's go. Okay, I'll take 1 damage on Night Sister. Let's roll that in again. And she's got 2 damage sides on, so that works well with Ciena's damage sides and probably all of these supports that you're putting out as well. There's some cool stuff to go with her. I mean, you could also include Balatik, and Unkar, Ciena, and Balatik. Balatik's going to be untapping. You kill stuff, he's going to be untapping and going again. You've probably got enough resources to stick a couple of upgrades in your deck, and then if you see things like your DH-17 blaster or holdout blasters, things like that, and he can be untapping and putting out quite a lot of extra damage again. So there's a number of cool builds that you can do. Now, one other one that I will point out is actually, because of her points values, she can go with Aura Singh. Now, although normally Aura Singh and Balatik is another common sort of pairing, and of course Balatik's ability does tie in very well there, What you do get, of course, then is access to red with Aura, and that means you get access to some nice weapons, some nice extra weapons, and also Ciena allows you to generate quite a lot of resources. And there's always this temptation when you roll Aura to, oh, I could discard a card and turn that one into 2 resources. That's really quite nice. But then, of course, I'm losing all of this damage on her dice. Well, if you've taken Ciena, you can take her. You're going to have her at elite version, and you could start running a card like Logistics, and it becomes much easier to generate lots of resources to play some of the really cool control cards that yellow has, and still be able to afford to put out upgrades onto Aura. And then actually, if you've got stuff that is going to redeploy, things like the new LL30 for instance, well, that's going to redeploy onto Ciena. Well, she's more than capable of using those guns. She's got the 2 damage sides on there, and we're seeing quite a lot of weapons printed with more black sides on there. So she can pick up the fight after your opponent's killed off Aura, and you've still got an elite character, running and gunning. And you've had access to red along the way for other really cool sick plays, like being able to have access to Infamous, and then Tactical Mastery. I mean, you've got some really cool things that you can start doing off the back of all of these. You play your yellow card, it's got ambush, and then you play a Tactical Mastery, and you can start really putting together some clever things there with access to red and yellow with a powerful character like Aura paired with Ciena. Another thing I'll mention in terms of good cards to play with Aura, I mean, obviously big vehicles, but I'd also say the little ones too, and that's things like your ATDP, your what else? I mean, the old TIE, a First Order TIE fighter, and that's largely because you're also spending slightly less on the vehicle than say like ATST, and so you've got more resources available to be untapping it and getting a 2 value out of it, a double go value out of it. So certainly nothing to sniff at. And again, if you're doing that on like your 2nd round or your 3rd round and building up the pressure on your opponent, great. And then finally, I'm going to mention that because you're looking at generally decks in which you're using her to do this readying a vehicle, you've got to look at the sort of engine resourcey type cards. Your cards like Supply Line, Logistics, of course, is an obvious one. Data pads that you can put onto Ciena, and your data pads as well, of course, are going to enable you to play other things. I think one last thing to mention, actually, I don't want to leave this out. She's cheap, and she gives you access to red, and that gives you access to Imperial Inspection. Now, I know we've got Rend printed, and that's possibly going to have a bit of an impact on Imperial Inspection, to say the least. But just being able to pay 8 and have access to red and all the cool weapons and some of the combat tricks and something like Imperial Inspection is really big. And of course, Ciena does have that disrupt side on her, which just makes that little bit better again. And if you are using her with Imperial Inspection and Salvage Stand, because you're playing Unkar as well, maybe, well, look, she's got 2 resource sides for that. So she becomes as likely to set off your combo of Imperial Inspection and Salvage Stand as Unkar is with his... he's got 2 Disrupt and 2 resource sides, but she's pretty close. So it's really good for that sort of control-y package as well. So that's Ciena. She's got really good die sides. Considering her value, at 8 and 11, she's got some nice health, and she's got that really very strong ability, which is becoming more and more of a theme. I think the FFG are pushing the boat out a little bit with the characters and their abilities and just how strong they can be. Anyway, well, if you enjoyed that video, please hit like, share it with your mates. Please leave comments. It's really, this is to be a resource for people who are watching these videos, learning about Destiny, trying to get better, having new cool ideas. And so please do put things that you think of, or other cards that you think I might have missed out. Please put them in the comments. And as ever, if you want to get hold of me or have a chat, you can find me on the Knights of Ren Discord. You can leave a message here on the video, or feel free, of course, to join the Patreon. You can join for just $1 a month, get access to all the Patreon specific stuff, and join our little community talking about Destiny and enjoying swapping stories and tactics and all the rest. Anyway, until next time, keep enjoying your Destiny.